So we got an introduction there to that song, and I think that I'm learning it better, so we'll try it some more as time goes along. This past week we learned about some things that people are telling us are ways in which we can influence the behavior of others. If you watch the news and all the reports and everything, there was much to-do made about how you can use social media like Facebook and Twitter and this new one, Parler and stuff like that, to get a message out that will influence what other people do. Especially some of the news media were laying the blame at the feet of President Trump, who used some language on Twitter and stuff like that it was said motivated his followers or his supporters at least to do some pretty rough things. Of course, I'm of my own opinion that you can hear a lot and not be motivated to do bad things. You can hear about it, but you don't have to do it. But there is that possibility. And from what we see, especially in our world today, in the climate that we're in, it is possible for us to be influenced by what we see and hear on these social media sites. Not just influence somebody else, but we can hear and read and see things that will maybe influence the way we think. So I would ask us to kind of guard against that. But our topic for this afternoon is, sorry, that's not what I meant to go to. Just one moment, please. Again, technology has risen up and tackled me. Just for 1 second, let me get that off the screen so I can see where I am exactly. Okay, there won't be any PowerPoint with this lesson tonight, although it's about cyber stuff. Somehow that part of my slides didn't get accounted for, but that's okay. We'll wing it the old-fashioned way, if you like. What we're talking about here, I gave it a title. I can at least put that on the board, and we're calling it. These markers won't work. I'm not having a lot of luck this afternoon. We're just calling it cyber sin. Cyber means that world out there in the cyber world, in the world of online and such as that. What we have is a whole universe, actually. It's not just a world, it's a cyber universe. But as I was talking about earlier, this internet that we have today with all of its different features is a real help in many cases. It can do some good things. We can actually learn a lot sometimes by the research we're able to do online. We can find sources of information that can help us understand some of the things we're trying to track down. And so that much is pretty important if you can manage that. But also, the internet can be a real temptation to numerous kinds of sinful activities. And you're aware of this. This is nothing new, actually. But if you will, take your Bible and we'll read from the Scriptures some of the passages that relate to this. So, take the Bible first of all and turn to Proverbs, the first chapter. Proverbs chapter 1. And we want to read about verse 10 and forward. So Proverbs chapter 1, start down at verse 10. And you know, this is where Solomon is writing about wisdom and how you are to receive it and receive the words of instruction. And then starting in verse 10, he writes as though he would write to a child, his son maybe, or maybe as someone would address him as their son. And here's what he writes. It's some pretty practical information if you think about it. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all kinds of precious possessions. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in your lot among us. Let us all have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your foot from their path, for their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. We'll stop there because this gives us the core of what Solomon is talking about. Now, back in Solomon's day, of course, they didn't have the internet. They didn't have social media and Facebook and Twitter. And when he talks about keeping company with those who plan evil things, he was talking about in person. Well, you and I know that the situation's different today. Many things are not done in person. And many of your friends and my friends and your acquaintances and my acquaintances and so on, my school and business associates, are not people that we see in person very much. We do a lot of it over the internet. We are in some kind of a Zoom room with them, or maybe a FaceTime or something like that. But Solomon's instructions still carry a lot of weight. Still, we should be careful about who we ally ourselves with. On Facebook, there's this thing where you can friend somebody. Well, if you hit that friend connection, does that make them your friend, really? You don't know, do you? You might have some common connection with that person or that entity. Sometimes they're not just people, they're organizations and things like that. But, you know, is that really what a friend would be? Someone that you have friended on your Facebook page? And you know how easy it is to unfriend somebody. Yeah, you ever lost a friend in real life? Is it that easy, like it is on Facebook, to just unfriend someone? I don't think so. It's not quite the same thing. But we still have to be aware that doing things with other people, whether it's in person or whether it's on some kind of digital platform, it can still be a problem if we're not careful. We can still make connections with people like those that Solomon talked about. Yeah, let's lie in wait and wait for the unsuspecting person to come by. We'll jump on them in the night and we'll steal their goods. We'll then take it to our house and have us a bunch of stuff. That's basically what he was being told. And so Solomon's advice was simply this. He said, my son, do not walk in the way with them. So today we might reword that and say, don't friend them on Facebook. Don't read their posts. Don't attend their blogs. don't take in their writings and their information as truth. Well, why is that? It's because our minds are influenced anyhow, whether it's in person or over the internet. Our mind is still influenced. And I remember when I first started ever thinking about computers and stuff, I had this teacher who told me, just remember that this right here is an eternal principle when you're talking about computers. Now, if you're programming computers, it's very important. If you're working with them, it's still important because it's something that affects me. I hope you know what that means. If you don't, it means garbage in, garbage out. Okay? So a programmer would know if you put a program in there that has garbage in it, garbled language and incorrect instructions, that's what you're going to get out. A bunch of garbage that won't tell you anything. But if we are allied with somebody, associated with them, friends with them, and we start feeding in garbage from that source, guess what's going to come out of it? Garbage. Through maybe what we say, or what we do, or the things that we get involved in. Garbage is still garbage, coming or going. So that's something to be important about, be aware of at least. Another important point is how the internet and so on have changed our ability to get information. There was a time, my friends, when if you wanted to gather information, you had to go somewhere and find a book on it. Or you had to go down to the library and work through their card catalog and find magazines and journals that wrote these things about the subject you're interested in. But now everything is very rapidly accessible. In just a matter of a few minutes, you can search millions of different records and find things that you're looking for. Our attraction to things is very immediate, and many who put stuff on the internet know this. They know that if they can hook you with something very attractive or interesting or that looks like it's a good thing, then your connection is almost immediate. You want to go from there to the next link to the next link, and sometimes that's planned. So we got to be aware and not fall for that. But the thing is, when we are exposed to this information, it's important to do what Paul told the Thessalonian Christians to do. Did you know that he wrote to them about computer stuff? Well, kind of. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. And you've all heard this verse many times. There's actually two verses, chapter 5, verses 21 and 22. He says simply, test all things. Test all things. Hold fast what is good. Abstain from every form of evil. Well, that's good advice for life. It's also good advice for what you do on the computer, too. Test everything. That means check it out. If you see a reference that says x plus y equals x plus z, then you want to check that out. Look for some other reputable sources to help you verify what you're seeing. Also, you should hold fast what is good. Yes, if it's good information and you have verified it and you want to use it again, then save it. That's what I do. I've got me some folders where I put stuff that I have verified that I know is right, and I save it there in case I want to come back and revisit that idea. But also, we ought to abstain from every form of evil. There are computer programs now that you can get that work with your browser, your search engine, and they will kind of sniff out websites that are questionable if you give it some information to look for. And that helps. You can actually keep from going to some places where information might hurt you. It's too bad we don't have something like that in real life. You know, a little fellow that walks along with us and he sniffs out things and just, don't go there. You know, but on the internet you have that. Some of your browsers have that with them. Google Chrome, I think, you have a little part there that says this is a questionable website, stay away from it. Okay? But in the end, it's our job to test all things, to save what is good, and to abstain from whatever is evil. And if we can't recognize it and we need some help, that's okay. It's all right to get help to recognize things that might be harmful. Some of you probably don't know the name, but Robert Bork is a legal authority and had made some pretty good statements in books that he wrote. Robert Bork said this: a culture obsessed with technology will come to value personal convenience above everything else. And ours does. That's what he said. They'll value personal convenience. How quick can I find it? How easy is it to get the information? Does it sound like I might want to use it? And he says we'll value that above everything else, like whether it's true or not, or whether it's safe or accurate or usable. Okay, so what we're going to talk about first here are some dangerous things that you might find on the internet. And surprisingly, even though the internet is not a fleshly thing, you can't reach out there and lay your hands on the internet. You know, you can't hold it in the palm of your hand. It's a nebulous digital thing. But the internet does provide a gateway to sins of the flesh. You might wonder, how does it do that? It's all digital, right? Everything is virtual. But virtual don't mean not real. It could be still real information that could lead us to sin. For example, this isn't a good night for technology, is it?
That's it.
We're having mucho trouble over here. Okay, can you hear me? Are we there yet? All right. So what I'd like to do is just point out a couple of instances where the internet can really get you into and hook you up with some sins of the flesh. And you know probably one of them that I'm going to put up here. You probably have already had it in mind. And that is the area of pornography. You might not be surprised, but you certainly might be, at how easily and how accessible pornography is on the internet today. Now, all of those providers that throw it out there, they all say, oh, this is for only people 18 years of age or over. Now, well, how do you know that? Does your finger pushing a key tell you how old you are? No. And so this pornography that we find pretty rampant is available to virtually anybody, every age, anywhere, any gender, doesn't matter. It's out there. How does the internet get us to sins of the flesh? Well, pornography is visual, and the thing about it is that what drives people to it is fantasy. What you see in pornographic sites is not real, but it generates a fantasy in people's mind. And that fantasy is fed by lust. I want that. I want to be like that. I want to be there. I want to do that. And what happens is, what you see on the screen there becomes an idol. Yep, just like a carved image back in the days of the Israelites, it becomes an idol. Something that people go back to, and they watch it again, they go back to, they expand their horizons by watching different kinds, and before you know it, it has become a sin of the flesh. There is actually a connection there. What happens in your mind is going to find a way to get out somehow, and that's the danger. Matthew chapter 5, verse 28 in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus put that together for us. He said, you heard it said that whoever commits adultery is sinning. But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. In other words, Jesus is telling us there, it's not necessarily the physical action you take, but it's what goes on in your mind. It's the mental agreement that you have with what you're looking at that makes a difference. Okay? So that's one area. There's another area I think that we need to be aware of, and I ran across this the last couple of years that I taught school. And that is that in the internet world today, there is also very easy access to gambling. It is no fun to have a kid standing in front of you and the parent comes in with a credit card bill about yonder long and says, I want to know how my son in this here school of yours ran up $12,000 worth of charges on my credit card. Well, and here I stand and go, I don't know. With just a little research, yeah. Child on his lunch break can get on the proper website with a credit card number and start wagering. Oh yeah, those sites say this is limited to age 18. Don't touch this if you're not 18. Blah, blah, blah. Well, okay. Little 14-year-old Johnny says, hey, I can make some money here. So he uses Dad's credit card number and bingo. That's where $12,000 goes in a heartbeat. And not just one time either. It's an addiction. Just like pornography is. Just like anything else is that's sinful and easily accessed becomes an addiction after a while. And we've actually had students 13, 14, 15 years old who had to be pulled out of school and put through rehab for gambling addiction. One of the thoughts that I had was, well, how do they keep getting hold of your credit card? Can you not protect that thing? But nonetheless, that's what happened. So I think that's to be considered as well, and that is to remember that gambling is another danger that you can find on the internet. And why is gambling bad? Well, if you had to pay off a $12,000 credit card bill, that's bad. But it's also bad because of what it involves. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, Paul writes there about the effective use of money and wealth and resources. Let's turn to that. 1 Timothy, we'd like to look at chapter 6, right here at the end of the chapter. And let's begin reading at verse 6. 1 Timothy 6, verse 6. We'll go down through verse 10. Now godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. I mean, what would motivate a child or an adult either to go to the gambling sites on the internet and spend a bunch of money? Well, what is it? Paul says to Timothy, it is those who desire to be rich. Yep. To a teenager, man, seeing all those dollar signs and everything, thinking, I can get some of that. Wow. Online poker, I'm pretty smart. I can beat those other poker players. Online slot machines, they make them. All you have to do is hit the key and the slots turn, and then you might win some money. Now, since I've mentioned all this, don't you go out there and try this, okay? I'm not promoting it as an activity you want to get involved in. But that is how it works. A desire to be rich, a desire for it. That's what makes gambling so very possible. Okay, let's move on just a little bit. Besides the things that are out there in the cyber world that are sins of the flesh, we also find that there's a lot of interaction. We call that social media. In the past, social interactions were face-to-face. You go down and meet your friends on the corner, you talk and visit and so on. You meet at somebody's house and you talk and visit and go over the issues of life that way. And that's how you form your opinions. That's how you form your foundation for the social and cultural mores that are present in your society. But now we have media where you don't have to be there, and you can kind of be protected behind this digital world window pane. You're here and you're part of it, but you're not really. Maybe I'm not really there. Just saying a few things and reading a few things. But what is that all about? Well, this is where we get into what we might call sins of the tongue. In times past, sins of the tongue, you could tell where they were coming from because somebody was talking. Somebody was saying it. And you knew that such things they were saying weren't right and weren't appropriate. But in the world of social media, you can post things long after you thought about them. You can post things at the moment you think about them. Or you can read things that other people have posted without thinking about them much. And those things stay there. Those posted items are permanent, pretty much. They don't ever go away. And so, if you haven't spent much time thinking about them, then you might say something that is sinful or hurtful. Now, we've seen some of this recently. Posts on Facebook and Twitter that weren't designed to be informational. They weren't designed to be upbuilding to anybody. They were designed to hurt people. Designed to put down somebody. Liberal or conservative or in between or whatever, many things are posted that are designed to hurt people. And we don't want to ever be guilty of that. That to me is the same as standing right in front of somebody physically and punching at them. That's the same process. They're still hurt. And when we talk about sins of the tongue that are posted, what we mean are things that are put out there for everybody to read. Back in the past, if you badmouth somebody, many times it was just you and that somebody. Maybe a few bystanders. But now, you say something bad about someone or something derogatory, and all of a sudden, 2 or 3 billion other listeners hear it. People who are not known to you or anybody else, and they're getting this message. That's not very helpful. In the Proverbs, Solomon makes a few statements about this. I'd like to just ask you to turn to a few places with me. Let's go to the book of Proverbs again. And if you will, indulge me here. Let's take a look at Proverbs 11 and verse 13. I would have had this on the screen if I had not been technologically disadvantaged. All right, Proverbs 11:13. A talebearer reveals secrets, but he who is of a faithful spirit conceals a matter. Oh, yes. Have you ever had the experience of somebody revealing something on Facebook that you thought was going to remain secret? Maybe you haven't, but I know people who have. They told somebody something in confidence, and before you know it, the whole world is looking at it. That's what he means here. A talebearer reveals secrets. That's not just in person, that's on the internet too, and that's sinful. That's violating your trust with somebody that's your friend. He who is of a faithful spirit conceals a matter. It doesn't mean he conceals it inordinately, but a matter that's been entrusted to me, I keep to me. And that's the way it should be. How about Proverbs 26 and verse 20? Turn over just a few pages to chapter 26. And at verse 20. Here's Solomon. I like this. This is wisdom. Where there is no wood, the fire goes out. Where there is no talebearer, strife ceases. Oh, how many times have we heard it said? Where there's smoke, there's fire. If there's a little kindling of unrest going on, and we say or post the wrong thing, it's like fuel to that fire. And it will be out of control before we know it. Now, I'm not a fan of any of the politicians that I know personally, but the ones that I've seen on social media, from the president on down, I think they need to read this. Not to add fuel to the fires. There's already unrest. There's already disagreement among people. It does not serve any purpose to post things that are inflammatory and call people names and try to run people down and tell things that may be harmful about them. All that is wood to the fire. And Solomon recognized that. It's true in person, of course, but it's also true out there in that cyber world. Don't fan the fire. We also might make unrighteous judgments. They talk a lot in the world today about prejudice, prejudging, forming an opinion about somebody or something before you know the facts. And my friends, that's easy enough to do in real life. If we don't pay attention to the facts, we can prejudge somebody, we can be prejudiced. But it's a lot easier online in that world of Facebook and Twitter to prejudge somebody simply because of a few words they've written. And they may not be like that at all, but that identifies them in our mind. Proverbs 18, verse 13, if you want to turn there. Here Solomon says, "He who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame to him." To answer a matter, to form an opinion about it before we hear it and understand it. Somebody writes a couple of sentences in a post, and all of a sudden we're going to label them as, outrageous, fire-starting radicals or something. We don't even know the people. Without the facts, we prejudge. It's also possible to react to things that we read online in a way that is malicious. Writing things that are designed to be harmful. Does anybody, well, maybe you probably do, you know what a troll is? A troll is someone who finds and writes malicious or aggressive and that kind of communication. You troll somebody, you kind of bait them, you kind of use words that are going to get a response, and you're hoping for an outrageous one. You're hoping for something malicious to happen. And that word trolling, I hear it a lot. We don't want to be guilty of that. That's something that's a negative. But what happens is, if one person does it, others are going to do it, and before you know it, you have a whole community of online people doing the same thing, trolling, putting out these messages that are designed to be malicious. They're designed to get a reaction. We also have to be careful as we wrap up our thoughts here in the area of social media. We can even run across false doctrine there in scriptural matters. I like to look around for information on scriptural subjects, and I have in the past. I've found some unique viewpoints about things that I'm studying. But we sure do need to be careful about what we look at and take as fact. In spiritual matters, there are false teachers out there. There are people who put stuff out in their blogs or in their memes. You know what a meme is? I had some examples of memes I was going to show you that don't have this afternoon. But these sometimes tend to make something look like a fact when it's not. And we want to not be taken in by that. In 1 John chapter 4, verse 1, John writes, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world." Well, Jesus knew nothing about the internet, but if he had known, he would have said that same thing, only he would have put about 6 or 7 exclamation points and a few frowny faces after it to emphasize it. Test every spirit, whether they are of God. How do we do that? We have to use God's Word to test them. We have to compare what we read against God's own Word and find out if that's true or not. And don't be looking for something that just supports maybe what we think, but look for the truth of what's being posted. And in matters of religion, yes, sometimes our own brothers and sisters in Christ, sometimes preachers, get all overboard with this posting of information, and they start to put out things that are their opinion and not the truth. And before you know it, we've got people taking sides and labeling folks with names and generally stirring up trouble among brethren. And that has happened. If you're looking at religious information, scriptural things within the church and people who are connected with the church, be careful. Understand what you're reading, and if you don't see the sense in it, then go look it up. See if the scriptures bear it out. Sometimes we see human wisdom disguised as Bible teaching. In certain blogs and memes and all that, you see subtle influences in my area, in science. I try to provide my students with a good balanced viewpoint. Here's what some scientists say, particularly about evolution, let's say, and here's some of the evidences they use. But on the other hand, here are some evidences that come from the scriptures, and these are good resources, and you should look at this too. But there may be those who provide information in catchy cartoons and memes and their blogs and stuff like that, where they disguise their own theories as Bible teaching. And we have to be alert for that, not to let misuse of scriptures be taken as the truth about some particular subject. And words are not always necessary. Sometimes just a picture of a couple of different items that seem to conflict with each other can make you lean a certain way. In Colossians 2 and verse 8, Paul said this: "Beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Christ." And we can very well stick right in there, according to the internet. All those things are things that can turn us away from the truth of Christ and cheat us out of our rightfully designated position of truth and knowledge before God. Then last of all, and we'll stop here, under the idea of social media still, the internet and all of those social interaction sites can very often become a time bandit. Yes. How many parents have found their youngster curled up in bed at 3 a.m. when they ought to be sleeping, getting ready for school? And what are they doing? Reading through somebody's blog about stuff, checking out the internet, checking out Facebook, with all of those things that now are so attractive. It's a time bandit. It'll take away the time we need to rest. I recently started teaching some online middle school classes, earth science. Ought to be fun, and I try to make it fun. But I've discovered after about the third session with these kids, we do it through Zoom, which is their pictures up here and my picture over here. And 80% of those students try to hide behind a blank camera. They won't turn their camera on, so I can't see them. I can't see if they're watching me and paying attention, or if they're playing on their phone, or if they're eating Big Mac or doing something else. And I don't have much leverage. I can say I'm going to report you to your parents because you don't watch and know what the explanation will be there. I had camera troubles, internet was slow, something didn't work right. But, I'm on the other side of it, and I can pretty much tell who's with me and who's not. And a lot of time it's because if I can't see you, I'm going to assume you're not with me. But there it is again. There's a time waster. We're in class, we're supposed to be making some progress on an educational subject, and sure enough, we got students who are frittering the time away on something else, playing games. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. Playing games is another big time bandit. But the end result of it is this, that we now in this society, And we had better really rise up and recognize what kind of things cyber sin might involve. All the way from sins of the flesh down through the social media and all of the things that we've mentioned. It's all real, and it's not just a thing in the sky. Today, I think we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. I believe as time goes on, and especially as those clever scientists out there develop more along the lines of artificial intelligence, and where you don't even have to say very much or type in very much, and that computer on the other side will know who you are and what you're after and how to get it to you. And those days are coming. So we have to be aware that that's going to be happening and kind of make ourselves ready to defend that which we care about. This afternoon we've tried to put out some information that might be helpful to you. If it is, I'm happy. If it hasn't made much sense, come and talk to me. Let me know what I can do to make it get across better. I sure would like to make it worth your while. But the real corrective action we can take, the real solution to all of this, is that which we already know about, and that is that the Bible is the answer that we're looking for. Jesus is the answer that we're looking for. Like the songs that we've sung, if we really make Him our Lord and determine that that's the way it's going to be, when we get to the invitation song here, I would ask you to turn to number 343 in your regular song book. And in our efforts to guard against all these dangers, we need to be on the right side. We need to be linked up inseparably with Jesus. And the way to do that is to let Him have His way with you. Let Him be the guide. Too many times we want to stand up and take a position of me being in charge. And we can't always be in charge. We must let Jesus be in charge and do like Peter wrote there in that passage. Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you. As we sing this song, if you have a need to be obedient to the gospel of Christ, please let that be known so that we may assist you with it. If you're a Christian who desires help and guidance and instruction from your brothers and sisters, please let that be known. That's what we're here for, and we stand ready at any time to help you with that. Please consider this, and if you will, come while we stand up and sing together. Would you live for Jesus and be always pure and good? Would you walk with Him?